Thank you very much. It's been a full day. A day that is certainly filled with lots of energy and lots of enthusiasm. Listening to the buzz all day is an indication of the importance that you're giving to this gathering. And so we started off today by praying and considering what might be the purpose and objective of this next 3 days, which is to try to move us from discipleship to apostleship, to take on the mission and to accept the call to be sent out with the gospel that has been entrusted to us. And I think the conversations that I've heard and the discussions that I listened in on would indicate that you're moving towards that and that you're enthusiastic about that. In one group, someone said, to be an evangelist is exciting. It can be exciting. But it's also difficult. And so for some, the first obstacle to be overcome is one's own fear. And some of you indicated that we sometimes are the primary obstacle to getting the message of Christ out to others. Certainly, Bob's presentation this morning presented to us the evolution of how our church has gone from a cultural reality to one where if you're not personally engaged, if you haven't made a decision to be part of it, then you've let it go. Now, some of us are here because we want to figure out how to get all those who are significant people, at least to us, back. And we struggle with that. And in one of the groups this afternoon, the point was made that we'll never get a perfect approach. We're not going to get everyone back. And I guess it's important for us to realize that even Jesus Christ didn't manage to hang on to all 12. So let's not try to do what is not ours to do. The imagery of going out to sow seeds, yes, sowing seeds is a difficult task, and there are times when sowing seeds makes sense. You can't sow seeds in wintertime. So, what are the good times for sowing seeds? And once you've done that, someone made the point, then let God do the rest. In another place, one member or one participant made the point that maybe we are too interested in the harvest, but we're not letting God do the work that has to be done before the harvest is ready to be taken in. Now, all this farming language doesn't mean a great deal to me, I have to say. I grew up in downtown Montreal where my idea of a forest was the one tree that grew on the street where I lived. But all the imagery that comes to us from the Scriptures speaks to us about the importance of trusting in the Spirit and in the work of the Lord. Some of the other things that stood out for me was to hear some of you say from your own personal lives and backgrounds how grace works. And I was particularly struck to hear how in many persons there was a turning point. A point which made the difference between what went before and what happened after. Now that turning point took the shape and the form that it did in different people's lives, and they're not the same. Some spoke about spiritual conversion. Others spoke about dealing with illness. Others I heard speak about the ongoing struggle of taking 2 steps forwards and coming and taking 1 step back, but somehow managing to keep going in faith. In one instance, I heard someone say that when I'd been brought up as a Catholic and experienced all of the cradle Catholic things. But at some point, someone suggested, but have you fallen in love with Jesus? And even though the person had come up through a Catholic environment, that question was one that she said she didn't understand. And of course, to me, that said what we are all trying to define and describe and bring together as the personal encounter with Jesus Christ. And when Eric spoke, and he used his experience as a married man, and he reminded us that the only reason he's a married man is because he proposed and someone said yes. A whole lot of you in this room laughed. And your laughter was a laughter of recognition. It was a laughter of understanding. Because you all understood what that meant. That's what falling in love with the Lord is. But in order to propose, it means, as someone says, you've got to speak. Somebody has to say something. And then you wait. And I don't know, Eric, if you had to wait a long time before you got your answer back. Or anyone else in this room who's been married, and you all had to wait. Somehow you had to go through that period of waiting, and that period of waiting is what makes the job or the experience difficult. That's where trusting comes in to play. I heard something that was both encouraging and at the same time a little bit sad. And that remark is associated with someone who said that our church needs to be welcoming. Well, if our church needs to be welcoming, that's encouraging to be reminded of that. But it's also saying something that makes me sad. Because sometimes our churches are not welcoming. And they are not welcoming especially to some of those persons who are most in need to be welcomed. We do not have a church of the perfect. In fact, as far as I know, there isn't anybody in this room that is perfect. Now, some of us are getting pretty close. But you remember yesterday's gospel. The heart of it was, God, I'm a sinner. And the rest of the world needs to be welcomed so that they can find there the experience of acceptance and love. Eric spoke about the kerygma. And that's the first level of announcing the gospel. Where does that take place? How many of you today spoke about your families? When Eric asked, who's gone away from the church, everybody in the room raised their hand because they knew someone real close that's gone away. But how do you speak those first words, and to whom do you speak those first words of the gospel? And most of it, happens in the context of family. And yet, families are also in crisis. And so we need to look at that environment. But we need to speak to our children. Someone said, and I was really struck by this, says, my kids go off to school, they go off to university, they get the message from the secular world, and when they come back to me, they tell me, you lied. Have we been lying? Is that what young people think we're doing? So the issue becomes one of credibility, but it also becomes how do we take a stand and provide an environment in which the secular message is countered by a message which is not the one that's being put out there as the truth. The Lord is the truth. But what environment do we need to promote that, to support it, and to uphold it in the eyes of many of our family members? That's just real close. The rest maybe we'll deal with after we've succeeded with them. So what is the message that we're putting out? And what makes possible the germination of the seeds that we sow? What makes it possible? Not just throwing out the seeds. There are other things that have to come into play. And those are the things that we need to be as well attentive to. We need water, and we need sun. Not just good soil. Good soil that doesn't get watered produces nothing. Good soil that doesn't have any sun produces nothing. So there are other elements that the imagery would suggest we need to be attentive to. And in the parable itself, when Jesus, and you notice this is one of those times when Jesus gives his own homily. He explains his own gospel. He didn't talk about the thorns and the rocks and on the roadside and the goods. He didn't mention all those things because he was just trying to embellish his story. Maybe those things are meant for us to try to identify where are we in that parable. Are we on the side of the road? Are we in good soil? Are we surrounded by rocks? Or are we choking to death because of the thorns? And someone said to me, our young people particularly are in the thorns. There was one particular point that struck me as well, is when someone says that we should not only sow seeds, but part of the environmental thing, I suppose would qualify as sunshine, is that we need to show that we are joyful. And when I heard that, I was reminded of a story that allegedly comes from Mark Twain, who, in talking about heaven, would refer to his Aunt Jane's description of heaven and all the people that were going to be there. And his conclusion was, and if that's heaven, that sounds like hell to me. So we have an obligation to be joyful and to present our good news as actually being good. And on a practical basis, I was particularly struck by two things to end off with. One of them is that all of this is great, but we have to deal with the reality of our busy lives. And so how do we deal with that? When busyness is overwhelming our personal lives and our family lives. And yet, God is found in all circumstances, including the busy life that we live, because it's the only life we have. And so God is there. So how do we bring that out? And the last point was, it's well to speak about the first proclamation, but do we have any idea of what the steps, what the elements, and what constitutes the process of making disciples? And we won't be making them simply because we wish for them. Once you've had the personal encounter, then what the hell do you do? And that becomes the practical challenge in making disciples. On that, I think we need to deepen our reflection. And so, running through all of these notes, those are some of the things that stay with me. It's been a great day. I hope you'll all come back tomorrow so that we can have another one. If this one's good, tomorrow is going to be better. Are we okay with what's happening? Yes. Thank you very much.